Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Principalities and Powers. This is Jordan, and in this one, Skylar and I will discuss Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, the old Russian cosmonaut. But before we get into that, there's some housekeeping. If you like this show, please go rate and review it. That really helps us out. It would be much appreciated. And if you want to follow us on social media, reach out to us. All the links will be in the description. We also have an email you can reach out to us at as well. Furthermore, if you want to support us monetarily, Principalities and Powers on Patreon, and we also take Bitcoin and PayPal. That's it for today. All right, let's get into it.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it.
For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, against flesh and blood, against flesh.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
But against principalities, against powers, against powers.
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality.
And against the rulers of the darkness of this age, the darkness of this age, the darkness of this age.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
In the pantheon of modern charlatans, few figures cast as dark a shadow as Sylvia Browne. With her gravelly voice, platinum blonde hair, and theatrical pronouncements about the afterlife, she transformed the ancient art of cold reading into a multi-million-dollar empire. For decades, she appeared on programs like The Montel Williams Show and Larry King Live, confidently proclaiming her ability to commune with the dead and glimpse the future, all while charging desperate families up to $750 for a 30-minute phone consultation. Her business reportedly earned $3 million annually at their peak, built upon a foundation of approximately 40 book luxury cruise appearances and her own Gnostic Christian church called the Society of Novus Spiritus. But beneath the veneer of spiritual enlightenment lurked something far more sinister. In 1992, she and her husband pleaded no contest to securities fraud after selling investments in a gold mining venture based on her, quote, psychic feelings, funneling $20,000 from investors into their Nirvana Foundation for Psychic Research. She received probation and 200 hours of community service, though this criminal conviction did little to slow her meteoric rise. One can't help but wonder, was this the accidental exposure of a grifter's true nature, or merely a preview of the moral bankruptcy that would define her entire career? The true horror of Browne's legacy, though, lies not in her criminal record, but in the psychological carnage she left in her wake. In 2004, she looked Luana Miller directly in the eyes on national television and told her that her missing daughter, Amanda Berry, was dead. Quote, "She's not alive, honey. Your daughter's not the kind who wouldn't call." End quote. Miller, who believed Browne, 98% as she said, died of heart failure a year later, never knowing that her daughter was in fact alive, enduring unimaginable captivity at the hands of Ariel Castro. Amanda Berry would be found alive in 2013, nearly a decade after Browne's pronouncement. This wasn't an isolated incident of psychic incompetence. In 2002, Brown told the parents of 11-year-old Sean Hornbeck that their son was dead, kidnapped by a, quote, dark-skinned Hispanic man with dreadlocks, end quote. 5 years later, Hornbeck was discovered alive. His captor was a Caucasian man with short hair. When the celebrated skeptic and magician James Randi offered her $1 million in negotiable bonds to demonstrate her abilities under controlled scientific conditions, a challenge she accepted twice on Larry King Live in 2001, she spent years making excuses before ultimately refusing to follow through. A comprehensive 2010 study by the Skeptical Inquirer examined 115 of her predictions about missing persons in criminal cases. In the 25 cases where outcomes were known, she was completely wrong in every single one. Not mostly wrong, but completely wrong. When confronted about her failures, Brown would shrug with casual indifference, remarking that, quote, only God is right all the time, end quote. Indeed, the question that haunts us is not whether Brown possessed genuine supernatural abilities. The evidence overwhelmingly suggests that she did not, but rather what psychological pathology allows someone to look a grieving mother in the eye and deliver false certainties that will torment her until death. Was Brown a true believer who had deluded herself into thinking her cold reading tricks were divine revelation? Or was she simply a predator who recognized that broken hearts make for profitable hunting grounds? From palm readers to tarot cards to seances, psychic scams are one of the oldest tricks in the book. Whether it was Sylvia Brown, Miss Cleo, the Fox sisters, Maria Duval, and even Uri Geller, people continue to fall for these fraudsters, losing their wallets and dignity in the process. And it is precisely these widely known stage magicians performing parlor tricks and acting as if they were authentic paranormal abilities who make cases like that of Konstantin Tsiolkovsky and Hermann Oberth all the more fascinating. Unlike the aforementioned hucksters, who could almost never produce any legitimate feats of psychic power, these two men apparently could. And it wasn't just talking to a dead relative, solving a cold case, or predicting the outcome of a war. The revelation these men received came in the form of technology, which would make humanity a space-faring species. The communications they allegedly received from otherworldly entities would change the course of history, rocketry, and weapons technology. While the snake oil traders in the psychic industry often come empty-handed, Oberth and Tsiolkovsky would in fact create something of real-world, tangible value.
This year, Russia celebrates the 100th anniversary of the birth of an early prophet of space travel, Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, seen in these old newsreel shots. Tsiolkovsky wrote many important papers on aeronautics and jet propulsion, but seeing further, he wrote, "Man will not remain eternally on Earth, but in his quest for light and space, he will penetrate, timidly at first, beyond the limits of the atmosphere, and will later conquer all space around the sun." Even Tsiolkovsky didn't foresee that the pioneers of space travel would be dogs. These are the first pictures of Russia's space dogs, huskies of the same tough breed as Laika, the passenger in Sputnik II. Several of them have already been rocketed to tremendous altitudes and recovered safely by
8 kilometers per second. This was the speed required to reach escape velocity and leave Earth's hollowed grounds and pierce the exosphere. This formulation was first published in 1903 over 40 years prior to the German V2 achieving spaceflight, by Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, a Russian philosopher and scientist, who, like Hermann Oberth and Jack Parsons, is considered to be one of the founding fathers of modern rocketry. Born to a Polish father and Russian mother in 1857, he contracted scarlet fever at age 9, which would alter the trajectory of his life forever. The illness caused severe hearing loss, and to compound his suffering, his mother died only 4 years later. His deafness led him to get severely bullied in school, and in turn he became a miscreant himself, pulling pranks and getting extended detentions. Surprisingly, he even failed academically and had to repeat the 2nd grade, and was expelled in the 3rd grade. This forced him to get an education through homeschooling. Though for most people this would mean a future life of poverty with no education and a disability to boot, it turned out to be young Konstantin's greatest advantage. He became an avid reader, losing himself day and night into literature of all genres. Had he stayed in conventional schooling, he likely would not have had the opportunity to pursue his own intellectual interests in much the same way. It was books that opened up his imagination to see how large and vast the cosmos was. He became a polymath, developing a high aptitude for physics, mathematics, and philosophy. By the time he turned 16, his father recognized his brilliance and shipped him off to Moscow to continue to pursue his self-study at the far more copious library of Rumyantsev, in hopes he might be able to get into university there. And it was here he would meet the man who would set before him the path he would take for the rest of his life. A librarian at Rumyantsev by the name of Fyodorovich Fedorov, who would be the founding father of the Russian philosophical school called Cosmism. Fedorov was affectionately called the Socrates of Moscow, and would play an instrumental role in shaping Tsiolkovsky's worldview. Fedorov himself, being quite the eccentric, not unlike Tsiolkovsky, was the illegitimate son of a dynastic prince by the name of Pavel Gagarin. His work received high praise from world-renowned Russian authors Leo Tolstoy and Fyodor Dostoevsky. And in Konstantin, genius recognized genius, as he observed the deaf teenager with no formal education had taught himself calculus, geometry, astronomy, and was very learned in the classics. Taking the young man under his wing, he would plant in him the seeds of cosmism, the uniquely Russian philosophy. Eventually, Tsiolkovsky would return home. He would go on to make a living on his own as a tutor and even a mathematics teacher. Despite the fact he was not able to attend formal schooling, he did challenge the tests that were required to be credentialed as a teacher and passed. Inspired by Jules Verne novels, Konstantin began his work on calculations to help man reach space in the late 1870s and early 1880s. He was able to save up enough money to rent his own laboratory, where he built a centrifuge in which he would simulate different levels of gravity. It was this period of his life where he would begin work on the writings for which he is well known. And it is also this period of his life where we get a deeper look inside of his strange mind. Throughout his career, he would write works with titles such as Are There Spirits?, Citizens of the Universe, and Unknown Intelligent Forces, among others. And though his purely scientific writings on steering thrusters, airlocks, and space stations were prolific in their own right, they were only a fraction of his entire corpus of work, which was primarily about philosophy, religion, and the occult. In fact, his work was driven far more by existential motivations than it was purely scientific curiosity. Both he and Fedorov both believed quite strongly that humanity's destiny was for the stars, that we were not meant to be bound to Earth, but we must colonize the galaxy. This was a driving force behind cosmism itself. He would even describe our planet as a vessel that was designed by a universal consciousness to birth and nurture our species until such a time as we could conquer entire galaxies and become indestructible. One of his famous lines, quote, "Earth is the cradle of humanity, but one cannot live in the cradle forever," end quote, condenses and elucidates his entire project. But he believes that in order to leave the cradle, we must align our will with a universal consciousness. Tsiolkovsky argues that human will is not autonomous, but merely a manifestation of the cosmos itself. The universe is a conscious, beneficent entity that guides all existence towards perfection and happiness. He presents a deterministic yet optimistic cosmology where suffering is temporary and insignificant compared to the eternal bliss that awaits all conscious matter in the form of, quote, eternal atoms. In his essay, The Will of the Universe, he speaks about how the universe will manifest mankind into an intergalactic species, and because of this, we will inevitably be driven to a one-world government with a president who will not be elected democratically, but rather appointed by a council. And that eventually all of the species of what he calls star sectors will be united under one governance, culminating in the uniting of the entire Milky Way galaxy under one governmental system. He speaks of this in a rather positive way, that it is sort of a destiny for all sentient races, that this unity, this convergence into oneness, is necessary for our ultimate destiny. In the same essay, he gives reference to these entities in which our galactic future is intertwined. Though he does not specifically name them, he says this, quote, "There are a number of other phenomena, however, in most cases as dubious as the previous ones. They tell us about the penetration of some intelligent forces into our brain and their interference in human affairs. I myself have witnessed such phenomena twice in my life, and therefore I cannot deny them. If they were with me, why could they not be with others? On this basis, I admit that part of this kind of phenomena is not an illusion, but a real proof of the presence in the cosmos of unknown intelligent forces, of some beings arranged differently from us, at least of incomparably thinner matter." End quote. In many of Tsiolkovsky's writings, he goes on into much more detail about these so-called intelligences of, quote, thinner matter, which gave him a sort of divine inspiration. In one instance with a journalist by the name of Viktor Shklovsky, he asks the writer if he, quote, communicated with angels, end quote, which he assumed he did by the shape of Shklovsky's head. We don't have the slightest clue what he meant by that, but Victor did ask Konstantin the same question, in return to which he replied, quote, "I talk all the time," end quote. His life's work was to help mankind ascend, not just out of Earth's atmosphere, but spiritually as well. Throughout his writings, he seems to suggest that many, if not most of his ideas, including the nuts and bolts scientific ones, came through some kind of telepathic communication with non-corporeal alien beings. There is a Russian term, ethereal sущество, which translates roughly into English as ethereal creature. This phrase was used numerous times by Konstantin in his writings, referring to a race of immortal beings who had advanced millions, perhaps even billions of years beyond humanity's current state. He describes them as almost translucent and hardly physical, that they could phase in and out of our perceived reality at will, not dissimilar to angels or demons, but at the same time would use the same words interchangeably for extraterrestrial life forms. He even claimed that these entities were regularly contacting humanity via telepathy and would show, quote, heavenly signs, insisting that he himself had witnessed these signs many times, though it is unclear exactly what they were, but presumably some type of aerial phenomena. And it was his belief that this species, which blurred the lines between the physical and the spiritual, was not in a wholly different ontological category from mankind, but that we could eventually become much like them through what he deemed to be scientific and spiritual progress. That our ultimate destiny would be to transcend our three-dimensional existence and take our rightful place among both the stars and atoms, to master reality itself. All right, Skylar, so we are diving into more eccentric rocket scientists.
Yeah.
There seems to be a running theme here.
Yeah, I was going to say, there seems to be a theme. That's crazy.
It is very odd. I don't know if... It's hard to say, like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg here. Mm-hmm. Is it that only the type of person who is kind of like religious, spiritual, could actually have the imagination to think up of these kind of technologies? Or is it the other way around, like they think up of these technologies and then they're like contacted by some sort of entity and they become more spiritual and religious? I don't know. But there seems to be this kind of running theme, especially with like, and we'll discuss Herman Obert here in a few minutes as well, who is kind of, you'll see similar threads in his life as well.
Right. Yeah, I think it's kind of more of the, are you aware of the concept of like the muse?
Explain it to me.
Well, it's sort of exactly this, like the person coming up with something great, like a great work of literature or music. They have, it's been described as something called a muse. So there's something pushing them to create these works. So it's kind of a classical, it's more of a classical idea, but this all reminds me of that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Where
it sort of takes on a meaning more than just the sort of surface.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it is some very interesting overlaps here and themes that we see keep coming up, especially when it comes to the topic of sort of, we're coming into like the modern era, the scientific era, the era of like rationalism, if you will, quote unquote. But you have, it's sort of this like liminal space between the old world of magic and the new world of science. And there's still a lot of the scientists are coming up still with a sort of magic worldview. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah.
I do also think that to think that way does help you. To me, it's almost like a tool to help you think more creatively and with more imagination, and so you can come up with more inventions, like Tsiolkovsky did with airlocks and stuff like
Right.
that. But anyways, let's dive a little deeper into Russian cosmism, which is a very fascinating topic all in itself. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the movement.
I didn't know that was a term, but I have heard of the idea that we're meant to leave Earth, et cetera, et cetera.
Like we're supposed to be a spacefaring species.
Yeah.
And that is kind of the thrust of Russian cosmism, but it is more than that. It is very esoteric at the same time, and all the Russian cosmists, I don't know if that's what you call them, but all the Russian cosmists there's always a running theme of talking about extraterrestrial life, but also talking about extraterrestrial life that aren't exactly corporeal in the way that we understand them, and later thinkers who have talked about extraterrestrials define them more as like ultra terrestrials, right? Like they go in and out of dimensions, and you think of Jean Keel and Jacques Vallée and stuff like that. They sort of have this perspective on the whole phenomena. But this perspective is like actually nothing new. This seems to be like Russian cosmism had this sort of idea. It was almost like implicit in their whole idea.
Which is crazy to think. That's pretty crazy that this idea is not new at all.
Yeah, exactly. Which is like, I don't know. It's just like, man, this is a lot of these things that I think there was like a Hollywoodification, if you will, of the alien phenomena and the UFO phenomena that turned it into like very materialist, and that they were just physical beings from Zeta Reticuli,
right?
And that's sort of how the paradigm in which we should understand them, and that when they don't actually behave that way, it kind of, for the modernist mind, it can't like comprehend that, right? Because that's not supposed to. But the Russian worldview of like the 17th, 18th, 19th century was not that at all. Like they had a very sort of mystical view of reality, and I think a lot of that comes from Eastern Orthodoxy as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, Russian cosmism is very interesting because it actually, a lot of Russian cosmists also engaged in like theology with like the Eastern Orthodox Church. Many of them were baptized in the Eastern Orthodox Church. Yet, if you looked at their theology, it would be at the very least heterodox, if not outright heresy.
Perfect.
And these guys, again, before ancient alien theorists like von Daniken and Zachariah Sitchin, the Russian cosmists had this idea before that too, like that humanity has been like slowly guided by some sort of consciousness or entity or being, which it seems like, at least I'm no expert in Russian cosmism, and a lot of the literature on it is in Russian. It's never been translated, so it's like hard to actually like dig too deep into it. But it's very esoteric and strange, and they have they sort of had these ideas that we kind of have seen surfacing post World War II with Sitchin and Daniken and stuff like that.
Right.
But they've had these ideas for a couple centuries, it seems, at least. It is. It's very interesting and very occult, like, and really to me it smacks a lot of Gnosticism.
Yes, definitely does.
There's a lot of, I don't know, Gnostic tendencies, but anyways, so Tsiolkovsky's sort of Gnostic view that humans would eventually evolve to more or less ascend their corporeal form. So he sort of saw like us, whatever this entity was driving us, and we would ultimately become like it. And I don't know if anyone has ever watched the show Stargate, which is very interesting if you're familiar with a lot of this lore, a lot of the paranormal lore, a lot of the UFO lore, because I think that the writers were. They seem to pull on a lot of the same threads. The show Stargate Atlantis actually has this whole premise that this race called the Ancients, who actually were sort of some kind of proto-human, eventually ascended into like a spiritual realm, but they didn't die. They became so evolved after so many millions of years that they could like literally ascend and leave their sort of corporeal form and become the species that was like benevolent and would guide the human race. That's how it's portrayed in Stargate Atlantis, if anyone's ever watched the show. And when I was reading through like a lot of Tsiolkovsky's ideas, I'm like, oh, this sounds exactly like
It's just Stargate Atlantis.
Yeah. I don't know if I have no idea where the writers got these ideas from, but they might have interacted with some of this, you know.
To be fair, that's pretty new agey.
That's true.
Like the age of Aquarius and the awakening of, you know, mankind, that kind of idea, so that we can again ascend into another form of life, I guess you'd say, right?
Yeah, totally.
Or a thinner matter.
Yeah, that's almost that's actually probably a way. Yeah, like Tsiolkovsky said, like a thinner plane. It's almost like we live in like a thick, dense existence.
Yeah,
and then there's this like thinner existence where things aren't so set in stone, if you will.
Yeah,
and that's kind of how he describes it. You know, it's not dissimilar totally to how a lot of people would describe quantum mechanics. Again, I have no idea.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point.
Yeah, I have no idea about quantum mechanics. I'm not the guy to like opine on it, but it's just how I've heard it somewhat described. But anyways, like Tsiolkovsky, Obert, Parsons, these kind of guys, it's not just them. Like Isaac Newton, John Dee, you know, with other characters we've talked about in the show previously. These are some of the guys who are pushing science and philosophy forward, right? It's not like the hardcore materialists. Right. It's not just like the people who think everything is nut and bolts.
Right.
In Carl Sagan's popular book that came out in the 70s, Cosmos, I've read this book. I'm sure a lot of people have. It's sort of like a brief history of science throughout all of human civilization. And it hardly even mentions the vast troves of occultists, spiritualists, pagan, religious, and Christian beliefs that have always been a part of science. And if he does discuss it in the book, it's sort of like more in a scoffing and hand-wavy tone.
Right.
Like I do remember in the book, he briefly touches on the Pythagoras cult, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they created the Pythagorean theorem, which is like a legitimate mathematical theorem that people use still to this day. But there's like a whole cult around it, and they sort of developed that like it was almost like they worshipped math in some way, or worshipped numbers. Like numerology was like a big thing in what they believed.
Yeah, they developed a system of worship around it, kind of.
Yeah, totally. And then like that's how you could actually hear from God, is like through the numbers in the universe, right?
Right.
Like, and it was sort of but there's a lot even more esoteric beliefs that they had. But you know, Carl Sagan sort of like hand waves this away. It's like, well, this is like kind of the only instance he brings up. You know, he does talk about Isaac Newton, but he doesn't really discuss, at least from what I remember in the book, he doesn't discuss Isaac Newton's alchemy, which was way more of what Isaac Newton did than anything else. And he was way more interested in alchemy than anything else. We know this by his writings. Of all his writings, about only 1/10 was about like the more hard sciences, like the Newton's theory of gravity and whatever.
Right.
But Carl Sagan says, like, just because they were like religious nut jobs doesn't mean that we can't use some and that's kind of like his hand waving. And I think I wonder if he sort of even bothered talking about the Pythagoras cult because like he knew that if anyone was going to dig deeper into a lot of the scientific theories and how the epistemological history of our civilization, that you'd quickly start to realize how occult and religious a lot of the conclusions were that they came to, and the questions they were asking were very religious in nature, right?
Right.
And so, like, a lot of the people who drove our civilization were communicating, at least according to them, were communicating with sort of entities and powers, if you will.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
There's kind of this like funny quote or funny line in Tsiolkovsky's thinking. So there's this it's an essay. It's called Konstantin Tsiolkovsky and the Occult Roots of Soviet Space Travel by Michael Hagemeister. He says this, quote, Tsiolkovsky condemned sexual reproduction as humiliating, as it is based on low animal passions, which only lead to decay, according to him. It should be replaced by artificial fertilization, parthenogenesis. The biblical legend that this is how Tsiolkovsky describes it, of the birth of Jesus from the Virgin Mary, he interpreted as the ideal of the future of women who will provide children but not be subject to animal passions.
Weird. That's some transhuman.
Oh, very. Yeah, that's
shit right
like
there.
artificial wombs
Yeah.
was like his idea. And he actually did write about artificial wombs.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like really crazy. Like,
when was this? 1903? He was writing about this?
At least early 1900s, late 1800s.
Wow.
He was writing about this.
That's crazy.
And he himself, I believed he had 2 or 3 children from what I was reading. And a wife, but he obviously didn't like the process of reproduction.
Weird.
But it is this there's this almost like very like, it's so weird because it seems like so many contradictions, right? And I think it's just my Western brain is like trying to wrap my head around how this guy views the world, because like in some ways is like everything is like communicated by these entities that he doesn't really understand them, and he believes they're communicating with him. And on the other hand, everything is just like mechanistic, right? Like we should just like, why are we even doing this like human reproduction stuff? Like, let's just create.
Yeah, let's just mechanize it.
Yeah,
make it easier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's very odd and very strange to me. So yeah, this idea that man is nothing more than a temporary but complex realm or common home of indestructible, that is immortal, atom spirits, which are scattered at death only to be reconfigured according to the cosmic law of evolution and the quest for happiness into more perfect, blissful realms. So that's actually another quote from Tsiolkovsky, just more describing what his sort of outlook was. And that like, we know that like energy, all matter is just energy, and all energy just, it doesn't really decay or go away. It just transfers from one state to another, right? And so this was sort of the idea that the atoms, and I think it was around this period that they had probably discovered atoms as
obviously he knew about them.
Yeah, he and so I think this was like very novel to them and very excited them, because they're like, oh, we're these atom particles, and that's what we are, and we turn into an atom and we get reincarnated as like something else. And that was also, reincarnation also is somewhat in Russian Cosmism as well. And it's based on this idea that you're like, all you are is atoms, so you're just reincarnated into something else, which is kind of true, I guess. Like your physical body is made up of atoms.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah. But you could see even how like commenting on his theology, this really to me doesn't like fit inside of a Christian worldview. despite the fact that many of these Russian cosmists were claimed to be Russian Orthodox, but,
Right.
Last kind of little interesting fact, Tsiolkovsky and Parsons both have craters named after them on the dark side of the moon, which anyone who's familiar with the dark side of the moon, there's a lot of conspiracy theories, obviously. We won't get too much into that today, but yeah, I don't know.
Very fitting.
Yeah.
Very fitting.
Yeah, there's some deep symbology there that is hard to escape. But I don't know if you had any final thoughts about
no, man,
Tsiolkovsky
I think
there.
it's what a crazy thing you found here about all this. It's I had no idea who these people even were and how connected they were to all this.
Yeah.
And that they were just doing the same thing.
Yeah,
that Parsons and Crowley and everyone was doing.
They were all doing it,
and
very
all around
common.
the same time.
Yeah,
too. It's crazy.
It's very common. Yeah, and this whole idea, this obsession with getting to space too, was something that kind of has struck me reading all these people, because they saw. They didn't see like Parsons, Tsiolkovsky, Herman Obert, Goddard was another guy that we haven't covered, but like. To them, getting to space wasn't just like a human achievement. It was like a spiritual act, right? Like it was an act of spiritual ascension. They had like this dualistic view of getting to space, which is very interesting. And again, not something that we totally talk about, or a frame that we talk about going into space into, as C.S. Lewis calls it, the heavens, right?
Right.
So it's very about ascension, hidden knowledge, that kind of thing.
Very occult.
Yeah, very
Going to space is very occult.
It seems that way. There's a lot of occultism with that.
Even now, there still is.
Absolutely.
They still NASA names all its missions and all its rockets after gods.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, and a lot of the stars and constellations are named after gods, and NASA. People should check out Diana Pasulka, where she talks about how NASA still does like weird rituals.
Yeah.
It's all very strange, and